Welcome to another edition of Consensus Unreality. Before we get to tonight's interview, I'm going to ask you to check out patreon.com/consensusunreality. For just $5 a month, you can access our full episode archive, 5 years worth that's only hosted there. Regular exclusive episodes, which are ongoing and exclusively hosted at patreon.com/consensusunreality. Written content, a Discord server, and if you join our print tier club, you get access to our printed Journal of Shells, plus other printed and recorded materials in the mail. That's really cool, so check that out. Thanks for listening. As always, enjoy the episode, and there's an extra hour bonus on the back end only on patreon.com/consensusunreality.
Welcome to another episode of Consensus Unreality. Does that sound okay, Dave? What are you making that face for?
It sounds great. I was pulling up my notes.
I'll start over.
Guys, torpedoing the intro here already. First video episode, possibly.
Well, they're not putting this in.
Yeah. It's in.
Man. All right. Welcome to another episode of Consensus Unreality. We're joined today by Joshua Cutchin. Third interview, I believe it is. And today we'll be talking about his newest book, which I have right here, Fourth Wall Phantoms. And this is if this is a video episode, which remains to be seen, you can see the book. I've been diving into this lately. It's really great. And we'll talk about why. So thanks for joining us today.
Well, I appreciate it. I feel like I say this to a lot of people, so I'm not blowing smoke. It's just that I like a lot of people. Every time you release a new book, like there are some names that you see pop up again, and you reconnect with people. And there's a lot of people that you see for the first time. But when I saw your name come up, I was like, oh, that'd be so great to talk to y'all. So, I mean that. Now you're one of like 150 people that I mean that about, but I mean that I mean that about you. So yeah.
That's better than nothing. Yeah.
Happy to be here. Yeah,
it's better than you filling with dread after you see my name pop.
Well, that's it. There's a list of about seven people where it's like, oh boy, do I want to do this?
Yeah. Cool. So I figure we'll just kind of dive into talking about this book, and we'll get into some other non-book related stuff, I assume, as the episode progresses. But I'm kind of interested in if you've had, so without asking you to explain the entire point of the book, have you had an encounter with a fictional incursion, as you call them?
I have to say maybe. So
Yeah.
to sort of give people an idea of what that term means and whatnot, the premise of the book is about fictions that come to life, specifically characters and entities, and a little bit about events that come to life from books that step outside of media more broadly into real life. And then that's really just an excuse to talk about some other theoretical stuff that I really wanted to talk about. So the question that you're asking would be predicated on my fiction output, which is one novel that about 7 people have read. So the short answer is no. In terms of something that was truly uncanny. But, one of the reasons that I wrote my novel, Them Old Ways Never Died, was so that I could maybe have some of these experiences. I have some friends who are authors and who are real, straight-laced atheist kind of types, don't believe in any of this nonsense, right? And even they've been like, yeah, sometimes characters will and won't let you do things, and you kind of have to listen to them. And I'm like, wait, hold on, do you hear yourself? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
That's weird, and I wanted to experience that. So I didn't necessarily get, a character popping up in my life. I did get some days when I would just puzzle and stress and overthink an answer to something narratively all day, and then I'd lay down to go to sleep, finally stop thinking about it, and then between falling asleep and being asleep, in that sort of hypnopompic state, I guess.
Mm.
Um, it would come to me, which is really obnoxious, like because you have to get up and you kind of have to
Yeah.
write it down, or else it goes away. At
Yeah.
least in my experience. And then I did have something that
Yeah.
was, I don't know, maybe it was retrocausal, but there's a character in the book named Bora, who's I don't know. All my characters are my favorite characters, but I really have a soft spot for Bora. And Bora is a pharmacist. And I went one day to pick up some medication for my sons at the drive-through pharmacy where we are, and somebody opened the door, and she looked a lot like Bora.
Mm.
She really did, and she was wearing this like this Ushanka hat of all things in like I don't know April or whatever. Um, and so for the longest time, I was like, is she my character? Is she Bora? Like, did I did I summon her like a tulpa or something? And then of course, I would go to the pharmacy and I would go into the pharmacy and I wouldn't see her. But that's not exactly something like you talk about with the pharmacist. You're like, hey, is this person real? Do they do they exist? Like, how do you have that conversation, right? Well, I have
Yeah.
since learned that she is a real person. Very fortunate. I don't want to deprive her of her autonomy, right?
Yeah.
But it did make me sort of think about why I chose that occupation for that character and why they looked so similar. As sort of a little nod to that experience, at one point, Bora does wear an Ushanka hat that I
Mm.
put into the book. Um, but yeah, or it was retrocausality, which is kind of like the dance that unfolds over the course of Fourth Wall Phantoms, because that really is the question at the heart of it. Like, are these examples of uh, characters coming to life? Are they manifestations of the author, or are they retrocausality? Like, did the author experience
Right.
this? It's especially useful for like events. Like, if an event comes true from your book, was it a prediction? Did you manifest it, or was it retrocausality? Were you pre-remembering something from the future in the past? I think there are some
Yeah.
cases where that is indeed what's happening. Like, we do seem to have a link to the future. Eric Wargo's work in this regard is wonderful. Time Loops, From Nowhere, fantastic books. Eric's done his homework. They're great. Having said that, um, it's a little bit more difficult when there is a character that is like a superhero or
Mm.
people who see Gumby, which happens a couple of times in the book. This 7 foot tall Gumby walking out of a cornfield in Nebraska. Um, and I think there's a lot of things that you can unpack about what that possibly says about our relationship to the phenomenon broadly, parapsychology,
Mm.
cryptozoology, and ufology specifically. It was a very long answer.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been reading the book a bit, and I noticed you kind of have Wargo comes into it earlier, and it kind of feels like a sis work to From Nowhere.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things. It's I had this moment. This happens when you're writing. This happens just about every time I write a book, where I'm like in the middle of the research process, and then a trailer or a book drops or an announcement for a book drops, and you're like, okay, I've got to incorporate this, or I'm going to be negligent,
Yeah,
And
right.
so I not only snapped up the book and power read it, and took notes and made sure to incorporate From Nowhere, because From Nowhere specifically talks about retrocausality with art, with creative types.
Mm.
Right.
But I had to sit down with Eric, because I've known him honestly since pretty much the beginning. We ran into each other at the first Fort Fest that I did back in holy cow, 16, I guess. So we've known each other for a while, but I had to sit down with him just to say, like, look, a lot of what I'm going to say reads as antithetical, as not antithetical, but like almost like I don't want this. I don't want what I'm writing to read as combative, because again, he's done great work, and that's
Yeah.
a part of this. But I think that it can kind of be supplemented. So yeah, I think that uh, in order to understand Fourth Wall Phantoms fully, a working knowledge of From Nowhere, Eric's work in general, that book in particular, and another book by Chidambaram Ramesh called Embodied Imaginations, which is literally stuffed with examples of creative types, authors in particular, having these experiences with meeting their characters. And I thought
Yeah.
that when I was writing this book, I was going to be like the one-stop shop. I was going to collect all these examples. No, there are tons of them. There are so many examples of this. It's a very pervasive phenomenon, and I've grown to suspect that I've grown to suspect that a lot of experiencers probably have something like this happen, and it's this sort of underexplored aspect of people who have had UFO contact or people who have had, to lesser degrees, ghost experiences or cryptid encounters. I think that this is something that probably happens a lot more than we realize.
Mm. Yeah, there's
Right.
like
Yeah.
a chaosy magic element too that I'm kind of realizing. Like, Grant Morrison's work obviously comes to mind, hyper sigilling in The Invisibles, but you kind of get that active imaginal realm of Jungian stuff as well. No.
Yeah, and that's the every project that I do. Guys, I really want to write short books. Like I don't want to keep on writing these big books, but yeah, I think that if you're doing your due diligence, like you do go into Grant Morrison's speculation and you do go into the Jungian stuff and you do have to kind of touch a little bit on the Nick Land hyperstition stuff, as
Yeah,
icky as it
sure.
is. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And what I've sort of came to understand is that like this is something that creatives have known for a long time.
Mhm.
And the power of language. I mean, Ben and I sort of, I don't want to preempt this conversation, Ben, but just the fact that we finally supposedly, again, I'm skeptical in a lot of regards, but we finally supposedly cracked the secret of artificial intelligence through language. That feels really, really substantial to me. I mean, I know that there's a lot of math involved, but like the large language models are predictive. And
Yeah.
so, like, that does speak to these ideas, these sort of Terence McKenna-esque ideas about, reality being dictated by language, and that sort of thing.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
not bad.
That was a good McKenna. Yeah. Yeah, it's so much like it brings, I mean, because then you bring in the UFO phenomenon itself and these other connected cryptozoological and parapsychological phenomena after kind of laying this groundwork of these more outlierish
Right.
encounters.
Well, because we
And
kind of have a
yeah,
space. I was just gonna say we kind of have a
no,
space for
please.
this in like our modern imagination, where it's like, oh, really creative people are super creative and they have really active imaginations, and I'm sure they see their characters all the time.
Mm,
But you do get into people who are like the non-creative types, who are like, um, line repairmen and stuff,
mm.
who experience these things too, that seem to sort of be plucked from fiction. And I have an interest in
Right.
these fictions coming to life, but I'm even more interested about what that suggests about the UFO topic.
Mm.
Which
Yeah, yeah. It seems like a lot of the book kind of goes there. And it also, I mean, the other way around about the creative relationship with it would be people who have these encounters and then develop these kinds of extreme, almost obsessive creative capabilities. Like, I mean, it's a easy reach for me, but after Eugenia Macer Story had her UFO encounter, she became like extremely prolific. Like after being sort of a more standard playwright and poet, after her strange light encounter, she became this like fountain of this stuff until she died. Just like extreme uh prolificness, yeah, whatever that word would be. Um,
yeah, I know what you mean. I've been sort of engaging with a lot of her work more because she has a lot of really interesting things to say.
Mm.
Um, and
yeah,
yeah, it's that sort of chicken and the egg sort of thing. Like I think that being creative makes you more susceptible to this stuff, but even if you ain't, being put in this stuff makes you more creative too. I think you're absolutely right.
yeah,
I have a good friend named Laura who's in the book, and she has had sort of multiple NDE like experiences over her lifetime, and she's a creative person as well. And a lot of her creations sort of walk the line between being retrocausal and being manifestational. And I think that I would venture to guess that it's a possibility, counting a lot of language there. I would venture to guess that it's a possibility that it is that sort of contact with that other space that's made her creations better. And by better, I don't mean in terms of like quality. I mean creations that like have a more of a tendency to bleed over into real life.
Mm.
Interestingly,
yeah,
interestingly,
yeah.
she sorry, go ahead.
No, it's
I was going to say, we've been talking about like, is
yeah.
this retrocausality, is this manifestational, etc. Um, I have a couple of examples in there where I kind of have trouble like seeing this question through a retrocausal lens. And one of those is a story that Laura shares where she was going to have some blood drawn at the doctor, the next morning, and she was being very careful, and it was very much on her mind to fast, and she ended up um, having a meal in her dream. And she woke up the next morning and still she was like, okay, well, in her dream she was like, oh no, I must have eaten something. But then she woke up and she was like, oh, it was just a dream. She goes, she gets the blood work done, gets a phone call a couple of days later, and they're like, yeah, you probably just snuck a little midnight snack. It's nothing big. It's not a big deal. And she's like, no, I didn't. And like, yeah,
Wow.
you definitely had something to eat. And like, unless like her dream of eating something was her pre-membering that her blood work was going to come back anomalous, like I really have trouble fitting that quite into a retrocausal framework. So I think that it's probably a mixture of a bunch of different things. But yeah, it is interesting to see that intersection between creatives and the phenomenon because it goes back into you know in the European traditions that I'm most familiar with, it goes back into fairy folklore for sure.
Mm.
And I think in a lot of cultures where um, in a lot of cultures where art is better treated than in the West, then it probably just all blends together. Where it's like, yeah, artistic people have these sort of spiritual encounters
Mm.
more often. Yeah, because but it's hard to separate the artist from everybody else because it's more of a mixture of things.
Mm. Is there?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
I think this maybe harkens a little bit back to Ecology of Souls as well. But is there somebody from the contactee movement that kind of sticks out for you in terms of developing that narrative truth fiction? I always think of somebody like George Hunt Williamson being this progenitor of like all of these narratives that seem to pop up everywhere. And we could obviously suss out that there was a ton of creative leisures taken in writing some of those books.
Right, right. I mean, yeah. So my 2 cents on the contactees in general are that I think they had something really weird happen to them, and then they sort of there's a combination of like having to prove it to people and then buying into their own hype and a lot of things. Like you see this with poltergeist cases too, right?
Mm.
Like there's something strange that happens, but by the time the media shows up, it's like, well, it's not happening anymore. What do I do? I've got to fake it. That sort of George P. Hansen sort of narrative. Contactees specifically in this regard, like the one that really comes to mind is George Adamski or Adamski. I don't know which
Mm.
pronunciation you prefer, but he had written a book or a short story, if memory serves, that was basically quite similar to his experiences with Orthon.
Mm.
And the frustrating thing, I mean, the liberating and frustrating thing about where I end up going in Fourth Wall Phantoms is that like the liberating thing is that it's like, oh well, maybe he manifested Orthon, so you can kind of reclaim those sort of skeptical arguments where it's like, well, obviously he fabricated this and he incorporated that into a story. But it's also kind of frustrating because you end up in a hall of mirrors where you don't care
Yeah.
whether anything is true or not, and it's not a comfortable, sane place to be because it sort of starts to bleed into all
Yeah.
aspects of your life. But the interesting thing about the Adamski stuff is that and this there were a couple of examples of things like this, but there was a story of a family on the Isle of Wight, I believe, who saw had a UFO sighting. Um, After the pictures of the scout craft came out, um, and they described it, they described the craft, and the sketch that the MUFON investigator or the Flying Saucer Review investigator made was basically the Adamski scout craft, right?
Mm.
And they claimed that they'd never seen any of those photos before. Because unless you were a saucer head, why would you have, right? And it's just weird because like that was a fake UFO. So they saw a fake UFO sort of manifest. If we read that in the most literal, charitable sort of way.
Yeah.
Some similar stuff happened with the Ed Walters Gulf Breeze
Mm.
UFO too. Like that
Yeah.
thing popped up in the sky. So it's like, what is going on there? And that sort of thing happens a little bit too often for me to comfortably ignore,
Mm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and
Sure.
there is a way you're just saying, well, people are just lying or trying to build on the hype of something, and I'm sure that happens some, but I think it happens a lot less than we think it does.
Mm.
Yeah. that I mean, so that when I was reading through Fourth Wall Phantoms a bit, and I noticed what I started thinking about was how there's this always this question of why do the aliens kind of look like media depictions of aliens? Why is there this feedback loop
Yeah.
of like the more the grayier they get in the media, the more grayy they get in the encounters themselves
Yeah.
until we kind of reach this gray alien singularity kind of
It's
situation.
it's an
And
Ouroboros, right? It's devouring itself.
yeah,
I mean, yeah. So that was, and again, being sort of a more theoretically minded person than just I like a good weird story like the rest of them, but I'm not necessarily a collector of weird stories. I like to sort of go into those theoretical spaces, and the two people I think that you really have to mention when you sort of bring up this topic, which is one of the things that I wanted to discuss in Fourth Wall Phantoms, are Bertrand Mayust and Martin Kottmeyer. Martin here in the States, Bertrand in France. Mayust uh, has a great book, still only available in French for whatever reason.
Hmm.
So I had to rely on other people that I trust who had read it and could read it in French. But having said that, his work, he's done some lectures in English. Um, his work convincing makes a convincing argument that a lot of aspects that got swept up into the post Arnold era first appeared in pulp magazines. Um, and for those of us who can't read French like me, we do have Martin Kottmeyer here in the U.S. And Martin is one of the great unsung heroes of ufology, as far as I'm concerned. I really admire his work a lot, and it's the same sort of thing. He's, for example, illustrated quite convincingly that the first example of a UFO shutting off electronics, which has become a staple of sightings, um, first occurred in a sci-fi pulp, right, where this mad scientist from another planet has a comet come by the planet and it shuts down cars and everything. That was before Leveland, which was like the first example of that. I think shutting down a motorbike. But here's where it gets really confusing, and you kind of just have to like you don't get answers with this stuff. In general, you get answers with UFOs and ghosts and cryptids, right? But you really, really, really don't get answers with this sort of fact fiction thing because, like, I would argue, okay, yeah, that might be the first example of a UFO shutting down an engine or electronics or whatever. But like, isn't that a variation of a ghost blowing out a candle? Like, it's the other that's interacting
yeah,
with our technology and shutting it down. And I think that if you came to Martin with that, he could probably dig up an older example of that from some dusty old text, and then I'd find another way to think of it and reframe it, and then he'd point to something in the Bible, and then and we keep on going back and back and back. Fiction, fact, fiction, fact, fiction, fact. Until I think, honestly, if you follow that long enough, you wind up at petroglyphs, right?
Hmm.
You wind up at rock art, and like you're so far back in time at that point. And look at those and you're like, is this art? Is this lived experience? Were those things even separable at that point? And you kind of just have to shrug your shoulders. So I think the model that allows me to reconcile all this bonkers insanity is to think of it kind of like a loop, like in that sort of Eric Wargo way. Like it's not a time loop. It's like a culture loop with the phenomena.
yeah,
Phenomena. It's like a
right.
media loop, right? So I'm not really sure which one begets the other one, but I do think that our media feeds off of genuine encounters, and genuine encounters end up picking up things that first appear in media.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah, it always then begs the question in me, what are these like, where do they come from? If they have a sort of
Right.
corporeal effect, what like out of what material and out of what realm? Like if someone's photographing a UFO that is sort of a replica of a replica of a UFO, and then but
Right.
the replica is then appearing as a real UFO. What is it made also of like a hubcap? What is it made of? Or what
Right.
are these
Yeah.
things?
Yeah. It's like there's a Bigfoot museum here in Georgia that I'm really fond of visiting. And I know the owner, and but the first time I went there, all these great casts of tracks, and for whatever reason, I naively thought that like most of them were. I mean, this is back when I was drunk all the time, right? So so like for whatever reason, I naively thought that these were a lot of originals. It's like no, they're not. But then I was like, oh well, But like, isn't a cast always like it's in a chain of it's in this chain of like the original, right? Because the original, you got the original, you got the thing that made the footprint, and then a cast was made of that, and
Hmm.
then a copy was made of that. Maybe it was scanned or whatever. But like, there's always this like every cast is kind of in a way touched the original.
Hmm.
It becomes one of those philosophical questions
Yeah, there's some
almost.
like
And
Derrida in there somewhere.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I did read a critical review that was like, oh, he didn't engage with Derrida and Baudrillard and
Tack
Foucault and
on
stuff, and I'm
200
like,
more pages.
yeah, well, yeah, number one, the book's long enough, dude. But the other thing is just like, I don't really know if I have the. I'll be honest, I don't know if I have the intellectual acumen to engage with that. Like, I really don't.
Mm.
Uh, or at least if I do, like, it would have taken another 3 years to get the damn book out, and that's not a timetable that I function on, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and there's still plenty to talk about in this regard. And yeah, I think it is interesting to sort of ask, like, from whence do these things come? Because they're so personal and they're so close to home. Um, and a lot of them didn't make their way into the book. Well, some of them kind of did, especially Laura's stuff. But like personal, these don't have to be. The phenomenon doesn't necessarily adopt or adapt Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and all these like cultural touchstones. Like if you have your own personal mythology or your own personal work of fiction, like the phenomenon seems quite capable of picking that up as well.
Mm.
It
Yeah.
seems to be a lot more about like what you resonate with and whatnot. And yeah, I don't know. I'll be honest with you, Ben. Like I had a I had for the longest time resisted the idea that these things came from us in some capacity. But the older I get, the more I'm inclined to think that, or more accurately, that the distinction between us and other things is so porous that it really doesn't matter to say whether it comes from us or it's from outside of us because it's all kind of one big soup of being.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
sort of where I end up.
Do you get the sense that it's kind of like a Western undertaking? Because that's in like the Tulpa thing, right? Like I've heard you talk about this
Yeah,
before, and obviously
yeah.
Tulpa is really an invention of like theosophical thinking. I guess Alexandra David Neal's where it comes from, the
Yeah, it's sort of
Tibetan
like
exploration book.
yeah, it's the whole Tulpa thing. So that's been the kind of the hardest thing to dispel about this book is because you pitch it to people and they're like, "Oh, it's a book about tulpas," and it's like, well, yeah, you've got to talk about that, and that's sort of along the same lines. But yeah, the whole tulpa idea is really a confluence of similar, Buddhist ideas, and then theosophy coming in and sort of joining them together. That specific word and that specific tradition isn't as ancient as we're led to believe.
Yeah.
But there are ideas about, manifesting thought and things like that. They're just not like, this Doctor Strange and the Ancient One version of of what tulpas are that we've been fed, as
Yeah.
paranormalists. Um, having said that, um, oh, you said something else that I was gonna say, and I can't remember. Something, it was something else embedded in your question or comment, and I completely spaced on it. But
No, it's interesting to me because tulpa itself is like a tulpa created by the West, like our use of it, like, and I feel like it culturally,
yeah,
it seems to have a lot more utility for the West for some reason. And I'm wondering what your opinion of that is. Like, what is our current
yeah.
fascination with that idea, and does it help us like reconcile something about our super culture or.
Yeah, well, it's so when people suggest the idea that a lot of these phenomena are tulpas, I kind of have this reaction inside me that's very similar to when people say that the UFOs are demons because
Mm,
I'm like, oh, you're almost there, like you're almost there. Um, and to be clear, I don't think UFOs are demons. I'm obviously in some really vague, nebulous uh, position right now where I'm not really sure what I think it is, but like I'm
Ben
closer
does.
to I'm closer to spirit phenomena than I am little green men from Mars, right? So like that's what I mean by that. But similarly, like yeah, the Tulpa question, I think what really sort of concerns me about it, or that I get tired of, is because it sounds like one of those things where it's just like it's a bit like the placebo effect. It's like, oh, well, this is the thing that happens, and we can wash our hands of it because now we know what it is. And it's like, no, really need to sort of dig to the bottom of this a little bit
Mm.
more. And the tulpa idea, I kind of wonder sometimes. I'm thinking of I came up with a decent analogy. I kind of don't like it because it's not exactly pleasant to think of. But like, um, this is a better way. Are human beings wombs for ideas, right? And so that's the way that I would sort of make the tulpa idea, the tulpa concept, play nice with some of the ideas that I'm actually much more sympathetic to. The ideas that I'm much more sympathetic to are this quote that's been apocryphally attributed to Hillman and Jung, which is, people don't have ideas, ideas have people, right? I don't think either of them said that, but like I love the I love the mouthfeel of that idea, right? And if you're creative at all, like you've experienced this, like you've had an idea that just like your best ideas sometimes, it's so frustrating, just come to you out of nowhere. Again, Eric Wargo's book, From Nowhere. Um, so yeah, I think that if you say that like human beings are like sort of the gestational vessels for these ideas to become manifest, then that does get closer to the truth and sort of brings the Tulpa thing into the discussion because like, the Tulpa thing is, where did Aunt Alice where did Aunt Alex get her idea for the monk? Like that's the question. The monk that she made a tulpa out of, like, well, where did that idea come to you from?
Mm.
You know, and so if that was an idea that was floating around there that sort of wanted to be made manifest, then maybe it latched onto her and it felt like her own original idea, and she tulpified it into something more tangible.
Mm.
That's a model that I can get behind more than like, oh, we're so great, we're just coming up with all these great ideas ourselves. Because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
tell you what, like again, those best ideas, a lot of creative types will say it, like they just come out of nowhere, and you
Mm.
have this like later on in the book, much later on in the book, I talk about steam engine time, which is this idea that Charles Fort has talked about, where he's like, the Romans could have had a steam engine, like, every, and up until the point that we made a steam engine, every time we put a kettle of tea on, like we were hearing the the secret behind the steam engine, but we
Mm.
never did it until it was steam engine time, until everybody sort of simultaneously said, aha, now is the time for us to do this. And that term steam engine time has popped up, has been sort of reused in the sci-fi author community, where they'll talk about like whenever you get an idea that someone else gets at the same time, for whatever reason, without any correspondence, there's just something in the air that's like, oh, we both got this idea at the same time. And that to me gives ideas a sense of independence from us, right? It's not like it's like it's just time for these ideas to come through. And I think that's a little bit more interesting than a lot of the discussions of tulpas. So I end up talking about thought forms and tulpas a little bit because you gotta, but it wasn't really a focus of the book as much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like I like thought form as a shorthand for almost all of this, but as
Yeah.
a specific term and the specific history of it in theosophy, I think yeah, I'm in agreement
Oh,
with you that
I
it's not
think
yeah.
I think I know what Dave was talking about. He said he loves the idea that the tulpa is a tulpa of like the West, and like
Yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
totally right, and that's the sort of topsy-turvy, loopy, fart sniffing stuff that I don't want to love, but I love because you're so right. Like we've tulpified the tulpa, and now it's a thing.
Right, right.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. I'll take fart sniffy as a
It's a compliment
yeah.
coming from me, trust me, because
Sure.
I sniff the heaviest of paranormal farts over here, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, you got a book on it now.
Yeah, it's true. The brimstone deceit. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I remember when I first was talking with you about doing this episode, I mentioned that book, Visit Kids by Michael Hallowell,
Yeah.
which I think you kind of mentioned early in the book, along with the other two you mentioned a few minutes ago, as kind of like three forerunners in your kind of area of study here. And yeah, I thought maybe we could talk a minute about like this really universal experience that people have with this aspect of the phenomenon of childhood imaginary friends and these sort of like weird autonomous entities that sometimes like leak into physical reality as well. Did you have any like favorite kind of rabbit holes you went down in that
No, I mean,
realm.
I think what I love about stuff like the Invisible Kids stuff is that sort of leakiness that they do have, right? And one thing that I've started to consider more is that like people have said, oh, children are more prone to paranormal phenomena because like they're more open to it, or they're fresh from the other side, so they're more connected to it. And the more I'm like, the, since writing Fourth Wall Phantoms, the more I'm like, well, maybe it's just because they have better imaginations.
Hmm.
Like maybe they're better at making this
Yeah.
stuff, and they don't know that they're not supposed to have it be real. And so that's part of it that I think is really interesting. The other thing is that like some of these stories in Invisikids, there was one example where a little girl claims that a witch has put a ball bearing up her nose, which like sounds a lot like an alien abduction implant sort of
Right.
scenario. But I think it's really interesting that like there are sometimes like these quote unquote imaginary friends like can manifest footsteps heard by the rest of the family, or can move objects and get sort of poltergeisty. And after I think I read that book for the first time in preparation for this because I'd always heard of it, and for a while it was out of print, and there was a new edition that came out through Jonathan Downes, I think. Um, and I just it really reading that book again really hit home for me, like how frustrated I've gotten with a lot of ufology, where they'll hear something like, the witch sticking a ball bearing up the girl's nose, and they'll be like, "Oh, well, that was a screen memory. Oh, that was a screen memory of an alien gray. Um, that was a screen memory of a gray alien that put a ball bearing up her nose." And it's like we never sort of sit with the question from the other way around. It's like the whole ancient aliens thing. Like, what if the gods were aliens? And I think it's much more interesting to go, well, what if the aliens are gods?
Right, right.
Um, and that's something that I said in Ecology of Souls, but I think it's worth reiterating here because um, which changes your day-to-day life more? The idea that reality looks like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or the idea that reality looks like the Iliad, or I don't know, the the Vedas, or any number of these like sort of texts where humanity's interacting with the deities. That affects my day-to-day life a lot more than little green scientists from another planet.
Mm.
So similarly, on that same vein, ontological shock. Like, it was a neat little phrase that John Mack, I don't know if he coined it or not, but he certainly popularized it in the UFO space. And it was a nice little phrase to talk about things like UFOs, but we've heard it all the dadgum time now in regards to this disclosure season. And the more people use it, the more I'm like, nope, sorry. Extraterrestrials are not ontological shock. I have, as I've said elsewhere, I have a shelf in my brain, and it's got a label on it that says alien invasion, and it's waiting for something to fill it up. It's just waiting for that UFO for me to sit in there. That's not ontological shock, folks. Ontological shock is not it's ontological shock is the idea that UFOs are so weird that instead of a screen memory, you really did go to a mysterious 1950s diner and were served by this cute waitress named Irene who smiled at you, and the next day you went and that wasn't there anymore, because that's how much UFOs bend reality. It wasn't a screen memory of a ship. UFOs are that dadgum weird that they warp reality around you. That's ontological shock. That's where you're like, I have no idea what I exist in. I have no idea what I'm embedded in. Everything that I thought was a law of the universe is more of a suggestion. And maybe it's just because I'm a contrarian, but I think that's so much more interesting and bizarre, and or maybe I gave up the booze for high strangeness. Maybe that's what it is. Like, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, it reminds me of there's a thing called the stone punch fallacy. Have you heard of this? It's
No.
two people were when this conversation. I imagine this conversation happened around the Romantic era, but they were arguing over Bishop Barclay's immaterial doctrine, and it's just which Bishop Barclay was an idealist, so everything basically derived from ideas. So he's kind of like the fastest explanation of this concept, I think. But it amounted in a guy just kicking a rock and saying, "I refute it thus because the rock is here," So
Yeah,
I don't know. Like it's there's something about that with the nuts and bolts thing. I feel like
it's
somebody's
one of those.
dying to just kick a
Yeah,
UFO and be like, here it is, But
it, it's one of those reductio in absurdum kind of things. I mean, like, look,
yeah.
this is. I mean, this is a problem that I think physics has found itself sort
Hmm.
of being pushed into. There are you know infinite numbers of universes, and at least in some percentage of them, I'm married to Kristen Bell. Neat. How many angels can dance on the head of your pen? Like, it's just like I don't know how that speaks to lived experience, and I don't know what it has to do with the price of the milk at the supermarket. So yeah, I think that we could all sort of benefit from sort of checking in on ourselves with these things.
Mm. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
if we accept that reality is informed so much by narratives and by ideas, then how much should we invest in like a conspiracy of that thing being weaponized against us?
Oh man, yeah. So here's the thing. Life imitating art, art imitating life. We're all tired of the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, right? But there's something to it. I think that there's something to it that was sort of better formulated in more detail by Vladimir Propp, who's one of the founding figures of narratology, and sort of outlined these 31 functions of the wonder tale, the fairy tale. You can say, well, of course, things in life resemble stories because stories are built around the way that we process life. And it's like, well, kind of, but like at the same time, my trip to the supermarket doesn't resemble the hero's journey. My day watching Netflix on the couch doesn't either. But important things do, and spiritual things do, and transformative things do. And I think that's the thing that you really need to focus on. So to that extent, like, yeah, I think that like you could almost view certain types of stories as archetypes, and I think they're I spend a little bit of time navel gazing and sort of talking about how these ideas sort of got my ass back on the road to sobriety back in
Mm.
2020 because I was able to be like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Get out of the belly of the whale, Josh. Having said all that, yeah, I kind of wonder if we're the last people to catch on, and not really us because there are plenty of people who will be the dead last to catch on. But
Mm.
the occultists have realized this for a long time. Occultism is always about faking it till you make it, and putting on robes and saying that you're Solomon, and hey, listen to me because I'm Solomon. And as long as you believe it enough, the spirits will believe it enough and they'll react, right? But I think that, yeah, I think that authority structures might be already doing this. I mean, like, isn't that kind of what propaganda is? Like,
Mhm.
at what point do you buy into the propaganda so much that it literally kind of creates a distortion field that warps reality? I mean, like, can we retcon, retroactive continuity? Can we retcon reality?
Mhm.
If enough people buy it. I know that sounds very Orwellian, but you know, this is something that theorists of propaganda have talked about for at least 60 years, and that was before things got as wacky as they are today. Um, in a more sort of smoking gun sort of way, there's a weird passage in one of Whitley Strieber's books. I think it might be Transformation. Don't quote me on that. But he talks about a memo. It's in the book. He talks about a memo where at Wright Patterson that says that the invasion of the visitors can be held at bay through managed belief. And it's like, what? Like, I feel like we should talk about that a little bit more. The idea that we can keep these things out of our reality through belief. And if that's the case, then yeah, how else is the narrative being shaped in that sense?
Mm.
There's probably a
Yeah.
whole another book to be written on, Pentagon sorcery in that regard. But it
Right.
does seem like it's happened some in the past. Great example, the best example that comes to mind, the only one I could afford to dedicate time to in the book is the Umo affair. In the
Mm.
'60s, I think, in Spain. Uh, Series of very sophisticated letters from another planet. People started seeing ships with this very distinctive emblem on the underside. Years later, revealed to be a hoax. But Pena, the gentleman who was the perpetrator behind the hoax, supposedly had enough CIA connections to obtain radioactive sand for some landing sites. And it's like, that's
Wow.
just, I mean, I don't have those connections. I don't know about y'all. So one of the narratives that's come up is that like, oh, this was a CIA plot to sort of like undermine Franco, right? But what does it say that like people still report run-ins with the Umites today, the Ummo characters today, you know? How well did that take hold, and like was that for some other reason, did it get away from them, you know, in their little, you know, black operation or what? um Interestingly too, you know, Jacques Vallée said that he saw parallels between the Umo affair and this Borges short story named Tlan Ukbar Tertius, I think is the name of it. But long story short, it's this secret society that fabricates messages from another world and end up changing our world into the fictional world that they mentioned. So a lot of like ins and outs to that particular story that says like, yeah, this sort of thing might have been going on a while, and like how many degrees of magnitude easier is it to shape reality with things that don't involve UFOs, you know, with things that involve policy and things that involve geopolitics, you know.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that any of that's the case, but it's worth entertaining, you know, because if this does exist, I would be damn sure that they know about it, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Given that that valet anecdote too, it's so funny because it seems like everybody found out about the Project Bluebeam terminology like 3 years ago, so it's in every comment on Twitter now. But
Every comment, it's like, this is Blue Beam. Yep,
yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
but like the architecture of what that actually could be could have been happening the entire time just through narrative, right? I mean, that could have been the Bluebeam.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing is that like that's the thing is that I think that you can it's alchemy all over again, right? I
Mm,
mean, like you've got the dry way and the wet way. You've got the slow, steady, safe way, and you've got the fast rocket ship to the moon kind of way that you might blow up on, right? That's the story of meditation versus psychedelics, and I think it's the story of all sort of manifestation. So, like the dry way, that crazy hectic way, is trying to force reality to bend to our will through technology, right?
mm,
And that's sort of the trajectory of the 21st century. Whereas that sort of wet way is the magician's way. It's like, you know, yeah, I'm going to keep showing up and doing this ritual, even though nothing ever happens for me. I'm going to keep showing up. And they might accomplish the same thing just on different time scales. So yeah, I can't help but imagine that, like, you know, if there is a simplicity to the way that you can make these things happen, that I can't imagine that that hasn't been going on in the background for a long time.
mm.
Um, huh.
I
I
mean,
was,
you see what I mean about like.
yeah,
So I finished Fourth Wall
yeah.
Phantoms, and I'm like, okay, I can't write about this anymore because like
No, yeah, it's
you wind up upside down. And you're like, nothing is real, none of it matters, but everything's great, and I can form my own reality. And now I'm gonna jump off the top of my house and fly, and it's like, no,
right.
no. Like I
Yeah,
think
it's
reality does have tendencies, and I think some of these things are more easily accomplished than others, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you sort of do
yeah,
wind up in this place where it's like you know, if I want to keep this idea in my heart as literal, in my heart and my head as literally as I espouse it here, like I'm never going to write another book again because it's all going to be dealing in these half truths and being like, I don't care if the story's fake or not, it's great. And it's like, you can't do that, Josh. So yeah, you're down the rabbit hole for sure.
Mm,
yeah. I mean, I feel like when you get to a certain point in any of this stuff, all there are half truths. You can't really
Right.
expect. I mean, I
Well,
don't think that there will ever be an answer to any of it, like a true answer that will be satisfying so that it can be incorporated into our lives as like an everyday
well,
thing. I think it'll always be a challenge.
I mean, we okay, a couple things.
yeah.
First one is we kind of already incorporate it into our lives, right? I mean, like, you know, I
Hmm.
manifested everything that I did today. You know, it wouldn't have happened without me, and it was an idea before I did it. You know, I made a spreadsheet today. Like, it's not it's not sexy or exciting, but the spreadsheet was in my head, and I made it. You know, I made it happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but the other thing is that the other thing is that I've had this happen a couple times, and it's happened with people that I really don't like, and it's happened with people that I do like. So, if either of you are, if the person that I do like hears this, you know, love you. I'm not talking about you didn't make me as mad as this other person did, but being on a panel at a conference, and somebody inevitably asks in the audience, like, well, what's one story that you think is a load of bull? And this is the same story. It's like people bring up these women in white legends, or these women in white stories. And the one that was most egregious to me was back at back at a conference a couple of years ago, where they're like, "Yeah, we went into this place and they said that there was a woman in white who died there, and she appeared in her wedding dress, and there was never a wedding at this location, and the woman never existed, and so we can dismiss that woman in white as an urban legend." And I about jumped out of my freaking skin. And I mean, like, you've read Footprints, like, you know where I'm going with this. Like, that's an archetype, dude. And like, it's and no, the haunting isn't what people say it is, and no, might not be a historical basis for that haunting. But until we know what hauntings are, yeah, maybe that idea or that story has gained so much traction that it manifests for people, regardless of whether they've heard it or not, regardless of whether or not there was any basis for it. Like, yeah, the woman in white story here at this crossroads, or in this church, or in this cemetery, the woman in white legend is BS. There's no historical basis for it, but people still see the damn woman in white, and that's a fascinating question for me. And the ghost hunter
Yeah,
who says, like, oh, well, all those stories must be, a load of bull because there never was a historical one-to-one correlation with this person who became this spirit. Like, you're not asking the right questions. I'm sorry, you're just not. That's a low resolution interpretation of a high resolution question that could possibly like open up a lot of insight into what's going on with these stories. Sorry, rant
totally.
over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, no.
no, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like there'll never be a if people think that there's going to be a what's the word like ghosts are like the scientific
Oh,
sort of
yeah,
image
yeah.
of a historical happening. Like that's some of those theories
Well,
are compelling to a certain extent, but I don't think that they're true. And like you were saying, they're often not actually. They often have more to do with what people think is going to be there than what would be there if it were some sort of
Hmm.
mirror or
right.
something.
And so that's what I sort of did love about this book, is that it gave me permission to really appreciate urban legends again. It gave me permission to do legend hunting and to realize that there never was, a T-bird that was wrapped around an oak tree because of some sort of drag race between these two greasers. You're like, whatever the story is, right?
Yeah.
And still see the Phantom car. Like, I still get to see the
Mhm.
Phantom car even if that didn't happen, because um, there's something about the power of story and about the power of belief and the power about what those stories kindle within us that I think really teases out this genuine phenomenon.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know if
think
it's like the opposite of the stone tape, but it's like a kind of like
yeah.
yeah. It's a technological update on the stone tape. We're the projector or something.
I mean, like, we are the stone,
Yeah.
we are the stone tapes.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
that's another one of those things. It's just like, again, I don't want to. I really I talk about my inner 12-year-old a lot. I talk about my inner 12-year-old as being like, my inner 12-year-old wants there to be extraterrestrials, and my
Mm.
inner 12-year-old sure as heck wants Bigfoot to be a giant relic hominid. And my inner 12-year-old, still kind of thinks and convinces me sometimes that ghosts are just dead people. But like, um, so my inner 12-year-old doesn't want this to be a part of us, right? But we're at the center of every one of these sightings. That might be why we don't have great video or photographic evidence. We have some. And we've got better audio evidence. This is something Tim Renner and I have talked about. But like, we don't have great evidence when there aren't people there, you
Mm.
know? Um,
Yeah.
and that really makes me think a lot about this.
Mm.
Yeah, there's no like trail cam photos of much of this, is there?
It's funny. I was actually on a Bigfoot outing in the southeast, and it's always amazing to me. I don't want to go off on the Sasquatch tangent now, but it's always amazing to me, like when you talk about people who spend a lot of time in the field and they're like, yeah, something about this doesn't add up. They can even be like, I saw one of the things and something about them isn't right. Something about them doesn't abide
Mm.
by our rules and our laws.
Hmm.
But on this particular property, they were said it was like, it was one of the best Bigfoot hot spots in the state. And then they decided to put up trail cams, and overnight activity dropped. It didn't drop to zero, but it dropped by 75, 80%. You know.
Hmm.
Huh. That is odd.
So yeah, so if you have a problem with the haunting or Bigfoot on your property, either put up cameras or just send me, because none of this stuff ever seems to happen to me. Like
Yeah,
I'm
true.
I'm paranormal kryptonite, I think sometimes.
What do you
uh,
did you ever look into I'm sure you have, the skull experiment? What do you make of that documentation?
I think it's interesting. It suffers from. I think it's the gold standard of a lot of this stuff in a lot of ways, in
Hmm.
terms of having um, artifacts that you can sort of share with people and some of the information that comes through. It still suffers from the same restrictions that we see in a lot of spiritualist experiments or psi experiments, which is like we can't really say where this stuff comes from. I mean, like there's this thing of like I shouldn't even have said psi experiments, because I think we have proven scientifically the existence of a lot of psi phenomena, and this
Hmm.
is something that I have heard said, is that we're going to be we can and probably will prove that everything involved in magical practice is real, with the exception of the spirits, because there will always be that question of are they outside of me or are they within me, and how do we have the epistemological tools to sort of confront that question. So I think that the skull experiments, as interesting as they are, sort of suffer from that same thing.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of interesting
yeah.
stuff that came out of that. There's allusions to the dead working with extraterrestrials, which I of course love.
Yeah.
There's allusions to the the spirits sort of making themselves in the skull experiments. There's allusions to the spirits making themselves manifest through different types of energy. One of which is creative energy.
Hmm.
And, the question I would ask is that it's like is that creative energy in the sense of like you know sperm and eggs, that sort of like creative creation, or is it creative energy in the sense of like our inner creative selves who just create media and art and stuff? I don't know, but
Hmm.
it's interesting stuff.
Hmm.
Or
Sure.
both. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Where do
yeah.
we draw that line? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So we were talking just because I feel like these would be interesting, and we can come back to the book maybe, but I want to get to talking about, you had a sort of a provocative statement when I was asking you what you've been thinking about lately,
yeah.
before the show. And you said how, well, you talked about AI a little bit, and maybe we can talk about that. But that scares me, so I'm going to put that off. Uh, you think that sort of alien abduction narratives have changed a lot lately.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what, like, sort of, how do you see that?
I think so. One of my favorite things about the phenomenon, one of the things I think is most interesting, is the way that it always is like one step ahead of our technology, generation by generation. Yeah, something
Mm,
that Valet pointed out, but it seems true, is that in the early 1900s we got airships, and then we got these flying saucers, and then we got the black triangles that coincided with the stealth bomber, and for the longest time I was saying to a friend of mine, I said, okay, so we're going to get drones next. Like the UFO are going to turn into drones, because that's just where our head's at, right? He was like, yeah, but we haven't really seen any drones since the Tic Tac. And then, late last year happened, right?
Hmm.
And all those drones over the Northeast. And look, I still remain sort of ambivalent about what those were. Like, I think they were probably terrestrial. I also think that people were looking up for the first time in a long time, so they
Hmm.
probably saw some strange stuff just because they were looking up. But the point is that the takeaway isn't trying to figure out what those drones were. The takeaway is that like, okay, UFOs and drones, they're not synonymous, but like that Venn diagram overlaps in a big way, more than it used to. And I think that that's sort of like the image of the UFO as drone is kind of approaching black triangle levels of
yeah.
archetypal form, right? So I say all that to preface. I think this is an interesting time and an exciting time. uh, too exciting. I kind of want to take back my pre-birth contract to be interested, to be incarnated in interesting times sometimes, but whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But, it's an interesting time because I think we're also seeing the software update of the UFO phenomenon, I think. And I base that not only off the shapes of the craft, but some things that I had been noticing that I kind of confirmed in passing with Earl Grey before he passed away. SoCal MUFON director, a great guy. But a lot of the things that we've been seeing in the past 15, 20 years are looking a lot less like those non-consensual, highly theatrical, surgical alien abductions that we saw throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, right? A lot of it looks more like, quite frankly, astral traveling, downloads,
Mm.
extended consciousness effects, beings of light that are visiting us. And, I have a couple of ways that I'm thinking about this. Number one, I think that the UFO phenomenon has been overdue for an update for a while, by which I mean, you've got gods and nature spirits and fairies and demons and the the Space Brothers and the little dwarves and the grays, and it's like, okay, well, what's the next one? What's the next thing? And for a while, like, I thought that maybe it would be Terminator bots, from the AI farms. Like, oh, the AI bots came and took my DNA to their underground servers last night, and they left in
Yeah,
their
yeah.
their hovercraft. Like, that's the new mask that the UFO phenomenon is going to wear. But I think it might be the fact that an idea that I've played with is that not only are we're getting fewer of those abductions, but we're also getting I think fewer structured craft. And I can't back that up with anything other than my sense. But I hear a lot more
Mm.
people talking about just lights in the sky now than I do,
Mm.
Yeah.
saucers and such. And I kind of wonder if, as we've become global and we start to flatten out regional idiosyncrasies, if we're not seeing something that's a less embellished form of the phenomenon, if that makes any sense.
Mm.
Mm.
So people have talked about
Yeah.
the regional differences between UFO occupants. The entire time we have had Space Brothers and Greys, like a lot of the stuff in South America has been hairy dwarves.
Mm.
You got a lot of robots before the fall of the Soviet Union, and that sort of thing. Um, but what happens when all these cultures are in dialogue with each other at the speed of light on a daily basis? Do we retain those regional differences, or do we all sort of start to see through that glamour to what is like the unskinned, the native form of this phenomenon, which
Yeah.
would be consciousness travel, light beings, lights in general? I don't know. Um, I'm trying to raise a little bit of awareness about this change in alien abduction and change in UFO contact because I just want more answers. Like,
Mm.
Yeah.
Eddie Bullard, Eddie Bullard wrote some great books on the similarities between shamanic initiations and alien abductions. And if alien abductions don't look like alien abductions anymore, then who do I turn to for my Eddie Bullard book? Like, you know, uh,
Yeah.
I don't want to be the one to write it. So,
Mm.
but what does that mean that it's sort of the flavor has changed? Does it mean that we got the message and we're ready for phase two, three, four, five, or does it mean no, the damn humans still aren't getting the message? Let's try something different. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's something that I've
I
been
don't
sitting
know.
with a lot. Something I've been
Uh,
sitting with a lot because we haven't seen an update like this, I don't think, in a while, and I think we got
Mm.
two updates that sort of flew under the radar for everybody.
yeah, that is
Yeah.
fascinating. And I too would, follow along with that and like to see, more testimonials of that type, because what comes to mind obviously is American Cosmic, and there's possibly some narrative leisure taken there as well, but also the DMT-X stuff. Have you heard about that? That's going on right now.
Is that the mapping of the DMT realm that they're attempting? Or?
Yeah. It's like it's a newer development where it's an extended. From what I understand, I mean, I've only watched YouTubes about it and whatnot. I'm kind of forgetting the one guy's name who.
Is it through Strassman and the Cottonwood Institute? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Strassman's connected, but there's
Okay.
a new guy who talked about a couple episodes ago, and I can't remember his name. But anyway, it's more of like an extended trip in the DMT realm. But I guess one of the more outlandish claims is that the intelligence in the DMT realm is sort of feeding information on how to progress the technology, or downloading.
Yeah. I don't wonder if we're not kicked out after 15 minutes for a reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, yeah. Um, yeah, it's kind of disconcerting in a way, to be here for this and just to see all this sort of changing. And I just think about like the number of people who, I mean, like they still might run into grays, but like a lot of it's love and light has won out in a big way, I think. In the experiencer sphere, right? So the public at large, facing down congressional testimony after congressional testimony is still sort of locked into that sort of Cold War
Yeah.
appraisal of these objects. But I think it's interesting that all this is happening, that these sort of changes that are happening, and that, as you alluded to, further exploration of the DMT space happening. I think it's interesting that all this is sort of coincident with those hearings. And look, I'll be honest, guys. Like I've had a buffet of crow this disclosure season, by which I mean that, like, I've always been sort of skeptical of that crowd and their aims, but after getting to know them a little bit better, I think that I had misapprehended their goals, which are, you talk to the random person on the street about the Kennedy assassination 15 years ago, and a significant portion would be like, "Yeah, Oswald, what's wrong? Like, what's
Mm-hmm.
wrong with you? Why are you asking this question?" Nowadays, it's hard to find a person who thinks that. Like, you'll get people to go, "Well, I don't know what was happening, but there were some shenanigans there, right?" Um, I think that's what the disclosure movement's phase one goal has been all along, is just getting people on the street to say, "I don't know what's going on with UFOs, but something is odd." And in that case,
Hmm.
yeah, I gotta say, like, I was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
100% I was wrong. Like, because the number of people that you will talk to about this who think that there is something odd going on is very different than it was even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and so it's interesting that we've got that happening alongside the post-truth era, and
Mm-hmm.
an era where nobody trusts the institutions or the authorities anymore. I mean, so it's like we're getting, so here's the way I see it. We're getting disclosure in an era when full disclosure could never happen. And I think that that's
Right.
really interesting because, like, I said at a
Huh.
conference a couple years ago, I said, think about the person you didn't vote for in the last election, and now they're president, and they're telling you that UFOs are real. Do you believe them? No. Like, the answer is just no.
Yeah.
And it's that problem away. At least it's that problem everywhere, at least across the West. Like, that everything has become so fractured and tribalized. Um, so, like, yeah, we're getting the biggest disclosure gains in the era when we can never have full disclosure, and in the era where there's more plausible deniability than ever.
True.
And
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Very trickster like.
Trickster times, yeah, exactly. And that's why I feel like, I mean, I don't. Again, let's sniff some farts again, right? I don't want to put too high an appraisal on it, but like, it feels like that's why I wrote Fourth Wall Phantoms. Like, I didn't.
Hmm.
I kind of tried to duck out of this commitment with my muse a couple of different times.
Mm.
I've got four other, so yeah, that's not fair. Three other half started, half researched books on my hard drive because I didn't want to write this, but it kept on coming back and was like, no, now's the time to write this. Like, because it is trickster time,
Mm.
where
Yeah.
fact and fiction sort of blend into each other. That's what we're in right now. AI is doing that too,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
It's doing
and
that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and so all this stuff is like, yeah, this is the time when Fourth Wall Phantoms comes. It just is, you know,
Hmm.
Mm.
that's out of my control in that way.
Yeah, that I mean, it does seem like it came out at a perfect time. It's kind of funny that you mentioned that it's sort of unrelated, but the thing I'm working on, which I mentioned to you briefly, is also dealing very much with meta-fictional things, which
Hmm.
I didn't want to do and I don't like, but which keeps insisting it is done. Like it's very adamant that it has, and the more I kind of resist the metafictional aspects of it, the more metafictional it
Yeah,
becomes. And
yeah.
so it's kind of maybe there's something in the air about uh facing our creations in some
I
sense.
mean, I
Mm.
think so. So, like, one of the rabbit holes that I was sort of pushed down on this project was this idea of metalepsis, which is the narratologist's term for breaking the fourth wall. When we call stuff, oh, that's so meta, like that's where that comes from, right? And
Yeah.
don't want to go too far into it, but like you could like Mad Libs out the word metalepsis in these books and in these essays for the supernatural, and it would read the same. It's boundary breaking. You see beyond the frames of your own reality. Once you understand that you're in the story, you can break the rules of the story and achieve, like, you know, you're conversing. You're literally conversing with higher powers, right? A great factoid that I love to say back is that if you think about Greek vases, they're always in profile, right? They don't face the viewer, with the exception of sleepers, the dead, people in altered states of consciousness, and monsters and gods. And like, oh, those are the paranormal things that look beyond the
Mhm.
frame of our
Yeah,
reality, right?
yeah.
John Keel's reflective factor, you look at
Mm.
the phenomenon looks back, all these things. But what's interesting about it is that there is a certain strand of metalepsis scholar today who thinks that metalepsis is overdone. Like there's too much of it. There's too much fourth wall breaking. There's too much meta humor, meta awareness, and irony, you know, in our media. And I'm like, no, that tracks with the 2020s. That completely tracks with the
Yeah.
2020s.
Mm.
That's why I was so hesitant to let the thing I'm working on be that way because it feels like
Old. It feels trite. It feels expected. That's one of the essays that I
yeah,
cite. It's like it feels expected now, and it's like, well, yeah, it would
but
feel expected in a post-truth disclosure, but no real
yeah.
disclosure kind of era. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing to be done about it. And that's kind of why I kind of felt very strange reading some of this book is because it's kind of like pointing at these things that I've been doing since before I really picked this book up. And so it kind of feels like I don't know what, but it's very cool and very interesting and interesting kind of uh I don't know, a signpost of some sort. But
Well, it's existential dread, right? But like the flip side of that is like if we narrated ourselves into this, we can narrate ourselves out of it. Like, you know, like
Mm.
that's the thing. Like, you know, um, if some of these ideas are true, and again, I don't know. I don't insist on many things very strongly. I don't know if y'all have been able to tell. But like, if any of these ideas have some degree of truth to them, then like we can find our way out of this. We just got to make better stories for ourselves, which is not it's not my original idea. I've heard other people talk about that too, but we just need to make better stories for ourselves.
Mm.
You know, it's kind of like every
yeah,
the beginning of every year, I get what I call the astrology flu because I listened to the year ahead prediction, and it's like all this dire stuff.
right.
But you know, half of it comes through, and it's like, you know, a political snafu or some sort of pop culture thing, and I'm like, okay, well, like, you know, nothing really. As much as I think retrocausality is a thing, nothing's written, and one of the things that Eric talks about in his retrocausality stuff is that, like, don't worry, the reason that you had that pre-membering, that sort of precognitive moment, was because you survived it. Like, you know, that
Mm.
was a lot of what his work sort
Mm.
of orbits around, is that revelation. So, you know, there's room for hope, but it's like a hope that lies on the other side of that sort of chasm,
Right.
that big dark pit between here and hope. Yeah.
Huh. Cool.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we could wrap it up there. If you want to give us some links to where to find this new book and all your other books as well.
Sure. It's available from Amazon, but I have a lot of people who say that they want to buy it directly from me, and that's better for the people you like and worse for the people that you don't like. So I do have copies of my own that I can mail to you without a markup, just media mail. Uh, you can contact me about those if you're in the States. Like international gets kind of dodgy with the post. I don't trust the international post anymore. Um, I've sent stuff to Canada and it's taken like 3 months to get there, and some of the stuff I've sent has
Yeah.
never arrived, and it's just like, okay, well. But anyway, sorry, ramble. I have copies for sale directly from me of all my books. You can reach me through my website, Joshua Cutchin, JOSHUACUTCHIN.com. There is a contact form on my website. That's actually, now that I look at it, way at the bottom. I need to fix that. There's a contact form on my website where you can reach out to me and just, ask about copies. Um, I will be my final event for the year. I had one that was canceled, but my final event for the year is December 5 through 7 of 2025. I will be the workshop assistant for Kevin Can and Jeffrey Kreipel's workshop at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur.
Awesome.
And
Cool.
yeah, you can find links to all that on my website as well. Something else that I think I'm doing in 2026, but I can't talk about, and who knows, we might not make it to 2026. So let's leave it there for
Yeah,
now.
right.
But
That's not the narrative we want to write, though.
that's not the narrative we're going to write. I agree with you. So, but gentlemen, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for letting me rant and rave,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate it.
Anytime,
course.
man. Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening, as always. If you're a Patreon subscriber, stay on the line for bonus content. Welcome back to Patreon. We're doing a little bonus pop here.
Patreon.
Oh my God! Do you really want that face to be on our first video episode? It was cool.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. Yeah.
Beautiful.
That was great. Always love talking to him. It's kind of funny. I feel like no time has passed.
Yeah. No, he's awesome. I mean, we didn't mention, but the guy is so prolific. It's insane. Like the way that he can
Yeah.
pop out these dense, like and super new books. Like new ideas. I feel like Ecology of Souls. The soul craft thing is an old idea, but it has never really